The richest man to have probably ever lived was born not in the bright lights of modern America or even to one of the ancient royal families of Europe, but first saw the light of day in West Africa around the year 1280 AD. Musa was born into the wealthy Mali Empire that had been established some 50 years before. The empire was the creation of Sundiata Keita, the first great Mansa, that is literally Sultan, Conqueror or Emperor of the empire, who conquered the Soso Empire in 1235, giving the new empire access to the rich trans-Saharan trade routes. By 1240, Sundiata completed the construction of his empire with his conquest of the Ghanaian capital, forging an alliance of West African warriors and Arab traders subordinated to him. He also created an effective royal monopoly on gold, requiring the payment of taxes, with every slave within his new kingdom personally loyal to him alone. By the time of Musa's birth and rise, Mali was well established as the dominant power of the region, straddling the rich gold fields of the area and contacting the salt traders to the north. Mali controlled the trade along the Niger and Sankarani rivers and was able to tax this trade to the enrichment of the empire and to its rulers. Musa himself was a man of high birth, but not directly in line to succeed to the throne. He was in fact the grandson of Abu Bakr. Musa himself would actually ascend to the throne for a bizarre event. He didn't have his rival killed or win any great blood-soaked battle. No, Abu Bakr II effectively abdicated his throne to Musa by setting sail into a probable watery grave in the vast Atlantic Ocean. Abu Bakr II was said to be obsessed with the ocean and was resolved to explore it to its edge, sending an initial expedition to this end. When only one ship returned from a fleet of 100 that had been laden with gold, water and provisions, Abu Bakr doubled down, outfitting a new, much larger fleet of 2,000 ships, following tradition by making Musa regent in his absence. As you may have guessed, the eccentric king was never heard from again, and after a few months, Musa simply had himself confirmed in his role as ruler, officially taking the name Mansa Musa I. The next 10 years saw Musa begin to forge his martial reputation as every bit a conqueror as his empire's founder. Demonstrating the vast riches of his domain, Musa mustered 100,000 foot, 10,000 cavalry, and effectively doubled Mali's territory, with the land under his rule stretching some 3,200 kilometres from east to west, or roughly the same distance from London, England to Istanbul, Turkey. The empire itself was administered under the rule of 14 governors or fathers who, similar to Sundiata's setup, were given wide powers and autonomy, including freedom to retain their own regional languages, religions, and structures, provided they pay for this tolerance with gold, that is, vast hoards of gold. Musa effectively monopolised all gold within his reach, around half the world's known reserves at the time, which along with taxes, tariffs, slaves and salt made him insanely rich. The true extent of this personal wealth will likely never be known, though it locally eclipsed that of even verified and known rich rulers of the past, and almost certainly the richest individuals of today. In a brief digression, it's interesting to consider several of the other contenders in the running for top dog in the mega rich historical category, though it's hardly an exhaustive list, so forgive any big names that I've missed. One man who perhaps enjoyed wealth in roughly the same league as our principal subject, though this is doubtful, is a very familiar face indeed by contrast, King William the Conqueror. The Conqueror had an estimated wealth of around $230 billion, just a mere 30 or so billion short of the richest man, as of recording today, Elon Musk, though the numbers are a bit sketchy. With a name like the Conqueror, it's obvious how William gained the majority of his wealth, owning vast estates in England and pillaging the country following his victory at Hastings. One anecdote that truly illustrates the Norman king's personal wealth was the shocking incidents of his immediate death in 1087. Abandoned by the leading men at his side, the conqueror's barely cold corpse was looted, deprived of his fine clothes and jewels, and left naked and humiliated. Moving up the scale, arguably surpassing even Musk and the victor of Hastings, was another much more recognisable face in Nicholas II, Tsar of Russia, who was worth an estimated $300 billion. Nicholas's vast spending habits can be starkly illustrated by comparison. An average factory worker in his empire would earn only around 500 rubles a year, though the Tsar's annual salary dwarfed this at 200,000 rubles. His clothing budget alone was set at 20,000 rubles, though such a limit was often ignored. Wheeling back in time somewhat, Jacob Fugger, also appropriately known as Jacob the Rich, had an estimated worth of around $400 billion, having earned his vast fortune through mining operations, though his parents had already built up a firm basis of wealth through textiles trading. Fugger, like a lot of mega-rich individuals, had a flair for investment, having his fingers in many pies. Fugger's wealth helped finance the Vatican and its projects, including famously the Sistine Chapel. In 1516, Jacob funded and had built Fuggeray, a housing project specifically for hard-up labourers and craftsmen. By 1523, the area had 52 houses, though if you think Fugger used the project as an opportunity to squeeze ever more wealth from desperate families, in this case you would be very wrong. The rent demanded was a single symbolic guilder per year. However, above and beyond the monetary compensation, residents were asked to pray thrice daily for Fugger and his family. Remarkably, 150 people still live in Fuggeray to this day, the rent remaining the same, the residents paying around just 88 cents per year. Our fourth contender presents a vast jump ahead into the wealth stratosphere. Having inherited around 75% of the wealth of Gaius Julius Caesar himself upon his assassination in 44 BC, Octavian, Caesar's great-nephew, later known as Augustus, was already a grossly enriched guy when he first rose to prominence. Unlike the others on our short list, including Musa, Augustus's galactic-scale fortune has been given a specific estimate by modern experts at around $4.6 trillion. That's right, I used a T, not a B. Augustus alone controlled around a fifth of the newly emerged empire's wealth, with the empire itself accounting for about 30% of the global GDP at the time. To put this gigantic $4.6 trillion into perspective, as of late 2022, the estimated GDP for the UK is about $3.5 trillion, the country being the 6th or 7th largest economy on Earth, and the global GDP in 2020 was around $84.7 trillion. Augustus amassed his modern country-sized wealth not merely from inheritance from Caesar himself, but also from politically motivated inheritance, major families donating part of their own considerable fortunes to the emperor to stay in his favour. Augustus also oversaw the doubling of imperial territory during his time, and held the rich land of Egypt as his own personal province. Finally, another real contender with Musa as the richest person ever was Emperor Shenzong of Song, who reigned around the same time as the first man on our list, William the Conqueror. Shenzong presided over a particularly prosperous period of Chinese history, the dynasty becoming the first to introduce paper money, the place producing the most bronzeware, the rice fields providing a vast source of trade, its production increasing dramatically given the farmers rented the rights to keep their farms. Shenzong's China created a navy to guard their lucrative trade routes. It's thought that Shenzong controlled around 30% of global GDP, his wealth, unlike Augustus, being described as immeasurable, though it must easily rival the Roman emperors. Shenzong directly controlled this humongous wealth through his highly centralized government and tax system. Of these men, Augustus and Shenzong provide a stratospheric high bar of personal wealth, though, believe it or not, Musa may have been even richer. What is certain is that Musa was not only obscenely rich, but also devout in his adherence to his faith, Islam. Islam was the official religion of the empire, but it was almost a faith of the elites, with many of Musa's subjects still adhering to older traditional African religions. Musa would do much to foster the growth of Islam within his kingdom, but first he resolved to fulfill a key pillar of Islamic faith, the hajj. Musa decided to go on the hajj, or the pilgrimage to Mecca, just over a decade after he had ascended to the throne in 1324, and it was this journey that would cement his enduring legacy as the Golden King of West Africa, at least in the minds of many for generations thereafter. Unlike previous kings of Mali, who had humbly made the journey with relatively small entourages, Musa's vast following looked more like a gold-plated procession with around 60,000 attendants, each garbed in brocade and Persian silk. That's right, every one of them, as well as 12,000 slaves, each holding 4 pounds of gold bars, or around 1.8 kilograms. For reference, as of September 2022, a single kilogram of gold is worth over £47,500, or $55,000. Let that sink in for a moment. This means just these slaves alone were hauling over £1 billion worth of gold on their backs, or around $1,188,000,000. Moving up the scale, heralds bore golden staffs while organising this vast movement of men and animals. Included in this throng were 80 camels, each bearing 23 to 136 kilograms of gold, meaning even at the lowest estimate, each camel carried over £1 million worth of gold on its back, and the whole train a staggering £87.4 million worth, or $101,200,000. This is all not even mentioning that this display would almost certainly have been just a fraction of Musa's wealth. Pocket change to line his black hole-sized pockets on his trip to Mecca. En route east, he was even said to have built a mosque every Friday and freely gave of this vast wealth, buying souvenirs with gold. He eventually made his way to Mecca and there devoted himself to study and religious contemplation. However, before reaching this goal, he had to pass through both Cairo and Medina. Cairo was reputed to be the richest city in Africa, a claim which locally amused Musa as he neared it, given the Mali leader's own vast standard of wealth. Any laughter Musa may have had rapidly died away, however, when the Sultan of Egypt demanded his guests demonstrate his obeisance before entering the city by kissing the ground before his feet. Musa was obviously reluctant, yet after a time he conceded, and during his stay in the city poured so much gold into the local economy that he caused rampant inflation that drastically devalued the price of gold. It would take the city over a decade to recover from this economic shock, which was repeated in Medina, the city of the Prophet himself. Musa returned home in 1325, but took with him many scholars, architects and experts, using these men to build his grand palace in Timbuktu, and perhaps his most lasting physical legacy, UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Djinjerba Mosque, which still stands today, its beautiful architecture a stunning testament to the reign of Mali's greatest emperor. Timbuktu itself had been annexed into Musa's empire as he headed towards Mecca and soon became a centre of trade. Musa was also a great patron of education, with the University of Sankore becoming a nexus of learning and culture, with a student body of around 25,000 and a manuscript collection of around 1 million, and the largest since the fabled Library of Alexandria. Musa died around 1337, decisively stamping his mark on the pages of history. It was because of Musa that his lands became known as a legendary kingdom of gold to the European mind, earning him and Mali its place on the famous Catalan Atlas published in 1375, nearly 40 years after his demise. Musa was almost certainly the richest man who ever lived, or at least near the top, with his meagre caravan alone putting modern billionaires to shame. Though he is barely known in the world today, he certainly deserves his place in history as the greatest ruler of the largest empire of Africa.